Hey there, Dr. Christianson here. I want to talk about sensitivities, food reactions, and the exciting news that they can actually get better. You don't have to be stuck with them forever. For starters, I want to distinguish the idea between an allergy and an intolerance. So an allergy is a very specific response that the immune system makes to something foreign. We make antibodies which latch onto little molecular things, and they alert our immune system that we're in danger. Now that's great if we're talking about measles and you've been vaccinated or you had it as a child. Now you carry these antibodies and you can stop it before you get it sick again with it. But it's a nuisance in terms of like foods and pollens and danders and whatnot. So an allergy is a specific IgE immune response. Now intolerances or reactions or sensitivities, I'm going to use the word intolerance. I think it's the best fit. These can include allergies, but they can also include other reactions that can be histamine-mediated, cytokine-mediated, neurologically mediated, other factors, other ways they can happen. And also I'd like to distinguish, make it clear that as far as reversing these things, there are some reactions, especially the allergies, that are likely long-term. That would be like peanut or shellfish allergies. There's a method in the end I'll talk about which probably is, well, studies have shown it can reverse peanut allergies. And that's not yet available for the public, so I've got to say they're not probably forever. At least not in the next few years, they should be able to be reversible. But for now, think of those as longer term. These methods won't apply. And also celiac, which is an immune response mediated by IgA pathways, that's also distinct. But most other types of reactions that we've got are things that are important, we should identify them, we should address them, but we may not have to be stuck with them, which is really cool. So I want to talk too about how the way foods affect us can be a big factor for general health. The data is strong that things like thyroid disease, for example, the immune system, the more heightened it is, the more aggravated it is from things that seem like threats, the more it's going to attack things by mistake. And that's the cycle of autoimmunity. It's really the sum total of immunologic stress that causes these immune soldiers to do the wrong thing and attack your thyroid in the first place. So that's how it happens. So the more stress we can take off of the immune system, the less apt it is to harm yourself. And the cycle is that we have some foods that we ingest that break down better than others. Foods contain big pieces we make into small pieces. And we start that out mechanically by just chewing and getting saliva and the stomach churning and mixing acid. But then we do that on a real small molecular level. And that's also stomach breakdown and more chemical breakdown. So big rocks become little pieces of dirt. And with allergies, they seem to be mediated by special kinds of proteins. So proteins are long chains of amino acids in very specific configurations. Imagine a paperclip. I don't see one nearby, but imagine a paperclip, but imagine it's made up of beads, like a long row of beads is shaped into a paperclip, okay? So now you grab this paperclip and you bend it and you mangle it. Well, it'll hold still, it'll retain that shape that you left it in. And proteins are a lot like that. They're kind of like these mangled three-dimensional strains of little beads. So digestion is pulling off beads. You're pulling off little tiny segments of that so those amino acids can become absorbed and used nutritionally. Now it's expected to not be a perfect process. So there are some peptides that are 2-3 units, di-tripeptides or polypeptides that resist the digestive function or don't get broken down all the way for various reasons. That's normal. When things work well, either there's too few of those to be of consequence and or the gut lining is healthy enough to where they do not absorb. They pass out and they leave in our stool and they don't bother us. But when things don't work well, there's a lot more of those and or the gut lining is wider. It's like a screen door with big holes the bugs get through. And this widening of these gap junctions of the cell membranes allows more undigested proteins to penetrate inside. Those big undigested proteins look to your immune system like something dangerous. Your body's like, oh wow, this is a virus sneaking in. We've got to go after it. And it's not. It's just a pancake. So that's the full cycle concept. Now, along those same lines, some foods are more apt to leave protein residues than others because their protein structures are more densely packed. So imagine that same, I got this paper clip, I mangled it up, and you can snap off little pieces of it. Well, imagine it was packed really tight, like a small ball. You can see now how it'd be harder to get inside and get to little sections of that thing. So too, some proteins on a microscopic level are more bound, they're more tightly bound. And that affects their physical properties. So those are proteins that are sticky in the big world. Now, you want to make dough or batter, you need stuff that makes it stick together. Otherwise, your muffins are going to become glop, like the kids used to make. They would just stir things up and throw it in the oven and call it glop. But things that stick together are more bound, more binding. And what do we use for flour? We use wheat flour, we use milk, and we use eggs. So we've got gluten, we've got casein, we've got albumin, and those are all binding, coagulating proteins. And together they make dough or batter that's effective for baking. But because of that, those are foods that are apt to become intolerant. And the benefit to wheat, probably no strong benefit, over other better forms of carb. So any issues with that, probably worth avoiding longer term. But dairy and eggs, there are nutritional values to them. And there are data saying that they may have some benefit if they weren't negative issues. So many, many people do have problems with them. And actually, when I wrote the Reset Diet, I was drawing upon my clinical experience. When I've tested people for having intolerances, when they have thyroid issues, adrenal stress, some combination of that, the majority are reactive to dairy and eggs and some other odds and ends too. So it's not that these are bad, dangerous things, but that many people who are not feeling well do better to transition off of them to allow their bodies to reset and heal. So let's talk about how you can reset and heal and possibly not have those be big factors for you. So the first big step is really knowing what it is you're reactive to. If you've got things that are triggering your immune system and they're coming in on a daily basis, it'll never calm down. So you really have to know what are your culprits. And I'll talk in really great detail in a different video about the ins and outs of testing for intolerances, but you really want to test. The sad thing is, it seems intuitive that you could say, oh wow, I eat this food and I feel totally fine from that. It can't be an issue. But that's not true. Many that have celiac disease have no symptoms from eating wheat, even though it's raising their risk for colorectal cancer, malabsorption, immune distress, all these bad things. So we can't rely upon our subjective sense of how well we are after eating a food. Some of these reactions, they might take days or weeks to do much of anything. So you could have symptoms that are not digestive symptoms, that are not after a meal, and they're not even immediate, but they could be affected by this food. So this is a case where we have to not listen to our intuitions. And the other pitfall, I'll go into this more in the testing, is that even doing the reintroduction type processes can be inaccurate. So testing is important. You want to really know what you are reactive to. And when you know that, there's a certain level of commitment that I would encourage to really avoid that food. Now, you could do a moderate level of commitment and mostly cut the food out the bulk of the time in most quantities and probably have improvements from that, probably feel better from that. But it may not be enough full avoidance to let you really reset and move past that reaction. So I want that to be the goal. I want you to be better and have a broader range of healthy foods be available for you. So with that goal in mind, when you know what you're reactive to, you want to avoid that. No questions asked, no quantities for a known block of time. Typically 3 months or 6 months are smart time frames to think of. But again, you could compromise it and probably not have any apparent drawbacks, but you wouldn't get better. And I want you better. Not just feeling okay, but to where this is no longer an issue for you. I want you cured. The next step is, and really you would do these together. So first off, know what your foods are, be off the foods. As you're off the foods, learn about your flora. Make sense of any bad bugs you might be carrying. A couple ways to go on this, one of which is to do some good testing. I'm always a fan of knowing what you're dealing with. Know thy enemy, know thy goal, and identify what the culprits are and address them. The other option that some take is to presumptively do antimicrobial treatments. And there's conventional and natural ones against parasites, viruses, fungi, bacteria. So you want to either presumptively clean house on bad stuff or selectively see if you've got bad stuff and then get rid of that. Make sure there's no horrible things hanging on. The third step is really rebuilding the flora. Getting the right bugs back in place again. To a large extent, that does happen from just the idea of those first two steps, getting the reactive foods out of your body and making sure the bad bugs are gone, your flora changes tremendously from that, especially being on a good diet. But you want it to become stronger again. So there's two facets to that. Well, I guess three we could think about. There's prebiotic foods, there's fermented foods, and there's then some supplements. Prebiotic foods are probably the biggest needle mover in this category. And of those, resistant starch is probably the largest. There's actually a gentleman who did a study on his culture pre and post 6 months of doing very high amounts of resistant starch. And he went from one of the unhealthiest measured microflora ratios to probably the best one this lab had evaluated. So that's really a big key to radically transitioning the flora. That's the fuel for the good bugs, is resistant starch more than anything. General fibers are helpful, but that's the most powerful. So that's probably the biggest thing for prebiotics and changing the flora. Then we think about fermented foods, nice adjuncts. I love them. Kimchi can be a nice option, sauerkraut, fermented vegetables. The ones that don't have significant amounts of sugar, you could consider kombucha beverages, but fermented things, nice to include. Past this point of healing, we could also consider yogurt and kefirs. There are those made from non-dairy options you can think about, but for right now, again, you don't want to suspend that because dairy is a culprit for most. Then we want to think about adding things in to repair the intestinal tract. And again, resistant starch, big needle mover that way. Other compounds are polysaccharides. We get those from slimy foods. And this is a category that's so helpful, but I don't know, some have taste issues with. Cabbage and okra, aloe, eggplant, big deals, real nice things, all foods that I love, and all rich in polysaccharides that help to benefit and heal the intestinal tract. In fact, cabbage has been really well studied that way. Any form of it can be helpful. Cooked cabbage, raw cabbage, juiced cabbage, all really nice stuff and all very effective. You can get some of these similar benefits with supplements as well, and the best studied ones would include glutamine, N-acetylglucosamine, quercetin, D-glycyrrhizonated licorice, probably some of the best ones for being well documented. Bone broth is popular in this category. I don't include it. The data is mixed about it having lead contamination or not. And you can get these same things elsewhere without the concern about lead contamination. And that's a drawback, especially those that have MTHFR issues, thyroid disease. Lead is really hard on your body, so any possible way to avoid that is worth avoiding. We'll talk more about the relevance of toxins towards these conditions. Then we think about actually desensitizing. So there's sublingual immunotherapy, which is a great model that's been tried and true for airborne allergies. And right now there's some exciting research suggesting that it may be an effective option for food allergies. It's not yet available, it will be sometime soon, hopefully next year or two. But again, this is more for just allergic responses. So this could be a thing to reverse peanut allergies. Those have gone up a lot over the last few years, like many-fold in the last several decades, so big thing. So here's a home way you can do that as well. And this again is we're thinking about for the intolerances. I don't want you to think you can reverse peanut allergies this way. I don't want you to try making celiac go away, but dairy, egg intolerances may be a good fit after those first steps. Now those steps, that avoidance, that cleaning, that reintroduction, the repair, really a good 6 months. Take some time, do that well. You want that to count. You want to be ready before you start trying desensitizing. So to do this, the thought is using a very low dilution of the reactive item and gradually increasing that. There's a formula I've put in the article that talks about how you can take small measured amounts of a food, dilute that, take that sublingual on a regular basis, and undergo repeat dilutions. Very straightforward, very easy. I've seen that work really well for people. And actually, as a kid, I was given skin tests for allergies, and not a fun experience. They take a little jagged plastic deal and give you 100 gouges on your back and then pour stuff in each gouge. And it's so bad. I'm laying there and you can't scratch it. And but enough of my therapy. Now they're done through blood tests, which are better, although skin tests are still used. But I was reactive to most all foods and most all animals at that point. And I did allergy shots, which helped some with some of them, But the foods, my folks didn't really go too deep into because it was overwhelming. And they really had no good options of ways to work around, 5 out of 7 foods out of like all these foods that were checked. As an adult, I became a connoisseur of tests. I tested myself from dozens and dozens of different labs, mostly to compare the labs, to see how accurate the labs were, knowing what the results should be. So dairy was a very recurrent issue for me. And by doing this process, I saw it work a lot for patients first, and finally I realized, why don't I really heal myself up and not have this limitation? So many years ago I did thoroughly. I was already avoiding, but I really did clear out and heal and repair and then do this desensitizing, and the tests started coming back better. So whether or not one would be prone to consume dairy or consume eggs, having less reactivity in the body is a good thing. You've got more immune resources for the things that are important. So enjoy the paper, take nice care of your tummy. The intolerances are real. They are a big deal. They need to be identified and taken seriously. But at some point, hopefully they can be moved past to give you more latitude. And that's what it's all about, is more freedom, better symptoms, and more ability to live your life without your health being a hindrance. That's the mission, that's the message. I'm Dr. Christianson here, and take great care of yourself. We'll talk again really soon.